What if I told you that your comfort is killing you? That the safety you seek, the stability you crave, the pleasant numbness of modern existence is precisely what's keeping you weak? There's a certain type of human being who walks through this world differently. You've encountered them before, perhaps in a meeting room where they remained unflinching when everyone else cowered, or in the crisis when they acted with cold precision while others panicked. Or maybe you've witnessed someone stand alone against the crowd, unmoved by social pressure, unconcerned with rejection. These people possess something that makes others simultaneously drawn to them and deeply unsettled by them. They have built within themselves a fortress of the mind that appears impenetrable. Their psychological strength is not just impressive, it's almost terrifying. Friedrich Nietzsche, who peered into the darkest corners of human existence, would recognize these rare individuals immediately. He called them free spirits, those who had liberated themselves from the herd, who had the courage to create their own values, who embraced suffering as the crucible for greatness. "What does not kill me makes me stronger," he famously wrote. But this wasn't just some inspirational quote for Instagram. It was a profound insight into the architecture of an unbreakable mind. Today we're going to explore how to build such a mind, a psychological fortress so resilient that it unsettles those around you, so authentic that it challenges the very foundations others have built their lives upon. Welcome to Psyvolve. I'm your guide into the depths of Nietzsche's dark wisdom, wisdom that, if properly understood and applied, can transform you into something beyond ordinary human frailty. Before we can build this formidable mind, we must understand its blueprints. And for that, we need to grasp Nietzsche's core philosophical insights. Nietzsche was not a builder of philosophical systems like Kant or Hegel. He was a destroyer of idols, a hammer that shattered comfortable illusions, a diagnostician who identified the sickness of his age, a sickness that has only metastasized in our time. Born in 1844 in Prussia, Nietzsche lived a life of physical suffering, social isolation, and intellectual rebellion. Plagued by debilitating health problems, he resigned from his university position at the age of 34 and spent the next decade wandering through Switzerland and Italy, writing books that would be largely ignored during his lifetime, but would later reshape Western thought. In 1889, he collapsed in the streets of Turin after throwing his arms around a horse being whipped, and spent the final decade of his life in a state of mental collapse, cared for by his sister.
He died in 1900, never knowing that his work would become among the most influential in modern philosophy. The cornerstone of Nietzsche's philosophy was his concept of the Übermensch, often translated as the Superman or Overman. But this wasn't some comic book hero with supernatural powers. The Übermensch represents what humanity could become if it had the courage to overcome itself. "Man is something that shall be overcome," he wrote in his masterpiece, "Thus spoke Zarathustra." What have you done to overcome him? The Übermensch is not born. He's forged. Forged through suffering, through the transvaluation of values, through the will to power. This brings us to Nietzsche's second key concept, the will to power. Contrary to popular misinterpretation, this isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering oneself. It's the driving force behind all human achievement, the impulse to overcome resistance, to transform, to create new values and new possibilities for existence. As Nietzsche wrote, "My idea is that every specific body strives to become master over all space and to extend its force, its will to power." But perhaps Nietzsche's most profound insight, and the one most relevant to our quest for mental strength, was his understanding of suffering. While most philosophies and religions seek to eliminate or explain away suffering, Nietzsche embraced it as essential for growth. To those human beings who are of any concern to me, he wrote, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill treatment, indignities. I wish them the only thing that can prove today whether one is worth anything or not, that one endures. This is where we find the seed of terrifying mental strength, not in avoiding life's horrors, but in facing them directly, in digesting them, in transmuting them into power. When Nietzsche declared, God is dead, he wasn't simply making an atheistic statement. He was announcing the collapse of all external sources of meaning and morality. And in the vacuum left behind, he saw two possibilities: nihilism, the belief that nothing matters, or the creation of new values by those strong enough to bear the weight of their own freedom. This is the challenge Nietzsche places before us. In a world without given meaning, will you have the strength to create your own? Will you have the courage to stand alone, if necessary, against the comfort of the crowd? Will you embrace suffering as the path to becoming who you truly are? As he wrote, he who has a why who live can bear almost any how. In the next segment, we'll explore how these philosophical insights translate into psychological strength, the kind that makes others both admire and fear you. Modern psychology has largely caught up to what Nietzsche intuited over a century ago. Authentic strength comes only through struggle. In the soft cocoon of 21st century existence, we've been sold a dangerous lie that comfort is the ultimate goal, that stress is always harmful, that negative emotions should be eliminated rather than channeled. We've created a world where convenience is king, where discomfort is pathologized, where the slightest resistance is seen as an obstacle rather than an opportunity. The result? A pandemic of psychological fragility. As Nietzsche wrote, in our civilized world, we learn to know almost only the wretched criminal, crushed by the curse and contempt of society, mistrusting himself, often belittling and slandering his deed, a miscarried type of criminal. And we resist the idea that all great human beings have been criminals, only on a grand scale rather than a wretched one. What Nietzsche meant was that greatness requires breaking with convention, defying expectations, and willingly entering into struggle, something our comfort-obsessed society actively discourages. Consider what happens physiologically when you face a challenge. Your heart rate increases, adrenaline floods your system, your focus narrows. This stress response, what psychologists call eustress or positive stress, is not your enemy. It's the biological foundation of growth. When you lift weights, you create micro tears in your muscle fibers. It's the repair of these tears that makes you stronger. The same principle applies psychologically. The repair of emotional wounds, when approached with the right mindset, creates resilience. This is what psychologists now call post-traumatic growth, the positive psychological change that occurs as a result of the struggle with highly challenging life circumstances. It's the empirical validation of Nietzsche's insight that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But how exactly does struggle build mental strength? Let's break it down. First, facing fears directly rewires your brain. Neuroscience shows that exposure to what you fear, when survived, weakens the fear response over time. Each confrontation literally changes your neural pathways. When you voluntarily expose yourself to what you dread, you expand your comfort zone and build confidence in your ability to withstand discomfort. Second, embracing solitude, a state many people go to extraordinary lengths to avoid, builds intellectual independence. In solitude, you learn to hear your own thoughts, to develop convictions that don't require external validation. As Nietzsche wrote, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Third, enduring discomfort without complaint trains your mind to distinguish between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable, suffering is the story you tell about pain. The mentally strong person feels pain fully, but doesn't amplify it through narrative. They face reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. Fourth, questioning received wisdom. Subjecting conventional morality and social norms to rigorous scrutiny strengthens your intellectual muscles. Most people outsource their thinking to authority figures, political parties, or social groups. The mentally strong person thinks for themselves, even when their conclusions place them at odds with their community. And finally, rejecting victimhood, refusing to locate the source of your problems in others, places the power to change your life squarely in your hands. When you take radical responsibility for your existence, you claim the authority to reshape it. This is what Nietzsche meant by his concept of amor fati, the love of fate, not passive resignation to whatever happens, but active embracing of everything that occurs, including suffering as necessary for your growth. My formula for greatness in a human being, he wrote, is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. This is not the shallow positivity of contemporary self-help. This is a profound affirmation of life in its totality, the beautiful and the terrible, the pleasurable and the painful. When you can genuinely say yes to everything that happens, viewing even your worst moments as essential to your becoming, you develop a psychological strength that appears almost superhuman to those trapped in narratives of victimhood and resentment. But this isn't just philosophical theory. The connection between struggle and strength has been demonstrated repeatedly in psychological research. Studies on resilience show that people who have faced and overcome significant adversity often develop greater mental toughness than those who have been protected from hardship. One famous study followed a group of high-achieving individuals and found that 75% of them had faced serious adversity in childhood or adolescence. Rather than being crushed by these challenges, they had used them as fuel for achievement. As we'll see in our next segment, history provides us with powerful examples of individuals who embodied this terrifying level of mental strength, people who transcended ordinary human fragility through their embrace of struggle.
Let's bring these philosophical and psychological insights to life by examining individuals who embodied this extraordinary mental strength, people whose minds became so formidable they unsettled those around them. We should begin with Nietzsche himself. Despite suffering from debilitating migraines, severe digestive problems, and periods of near blindness, he produced some of the most insightful philosophical works in history. He wrote, "To be sick and still create values that make the healthy sick, that alone forces me to keep my health." Rather than being diminished by his suffering, Nietzsche transmuted it into insight. He used his outsider status, his inability to participate in normal social life, as a vantage point from which to observe and critique society. His physical pain became the crucible for his intellectual breakthroughs. Consider also Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled from 161 to 180 CE. As the most powerful man in the Western world, he could have indulged every appetite, avoided every discomfort. Instead, he embraced the Stoic philosophy, deliberately exposing himself to hardship to strengthen his character. He would sleep on a hard floor rather than his imperial bed. He would practice hunger by fasting, all while leading armies and administering an empire. In his private journal, later published as Meditations, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Like Nietzsche would centuries later, Marcus Aurelius recognized that obstacles are not opposed to success. They are the path to deeper forms of success. Perhaps no modern figure better exemplifies the mental strength born of suffering than Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl described how, stripped of everything, possessions, family, identity, dignity, he discovered an inner freedom that could not be taken away, the freedom to choose his response to his circumstances. "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing," he wrote, "the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." What's remarkable about Frankl is not just that he survived the unsurvivable, but that he emerged with greater wisdom and compassion. He didn't just endure, he transformed. He converted his suffering into a message that has helped millions find meaning in their own struggles. In our own time, we might look to someone like Elon Musk. Regardless of what you think of him personally, here's someone who has repeatedly faced professional failure, public ridicule, and financial ruin, yet continues to take enormous risks in pursuit of his goals. In 2008, both Tesla and SpaceX were on the verge of bankruptcy.
Musk had invested his last dollar into his companies and was living on loans from friends. Rather than retreating to safety, he doubled down, working 100-hour weeks, sleeping on the factory floor, and personally intervening in engineering problems. This capacity to endure extreme stress while maintaining focus and creativity, what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility, or the ability to gain from disorder, is precisely the kind of terrifying mental strength we're exploring. This is the essence of Nietzschean strength, not just bouncing back from adversity, but becoming more powerful because of it. Using the very thing designed to destroy you as the foundation for your rebirth. But these examples shouldn't feel remote from your own experience. Think of the person in your life who remained steady when everything fell apart. The friend who faced terminal illness with equanimity. The colleague who lost everything in a divorce, yet showed up to work with focus and determination. The parent who buried a child, yet somehow found the strength to continue living with purpose. These are the people who unsettle us with their strength, not because they don't feel pain. They feel it deeply, but because they have integrated that pain into their being rather than being defined by it. As Nietzsche wrote, "The spiritual strength of a person is measured precisely by how much truth he could take, or more precisely, to what extent he needs it to be thinned down, veiled, sweetened, blunted, and falsified." The mentally strong don't need reality to be cushioned or sanitized. They can look directly at the harshest truths without flinching. And this capacity to face reality without illusion is both admirable and deeply unsettling to those who cannot do the same. Now that we've seen these principles in action through historical and contemporary examples, let's explore how you can apply this dark wisdom to build your own unassailable mind. Before we continue with our practical framework, I want to thank you for being part of the Axis of Being community. Your commitment to deeper psychological understanding doesn't go unnoticed. If you're finding value in this exploration of Nietzschean psychology, take a moment to hit the subscribe button and join the psychological game, our ongoing conversation about the hidden forces that shape human behavior. And I'm genuinely curious. What struggle in your life has ultimately made you stronger? Or what challenge are you currently facing
that might contain the seeds of greater strength. Share your experience in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear. Now, let's continue our journey into building a mind so strong it terrifies people. It's time to translate Nietzsche's philosophical insights and psychological principles into practical steps you can take to build extraordinary mental strength. This isn't about becoming invulnerable, an impossible and undesirable goal, but about developing the capacity to use everything that happens to you, especially the painful parts, as fuel for growth. Here's your framework for building a terrifyingly strong mind. Step 1. Practice voluntary discomfort. Nietzsche wrote, "The discipline of suffering, of great suffering, do you not know that only this discipline has created all enhancements of man so far?" Begin deliberately introducing discomfort into your life. This doesn't mean causing yourself harm, but rather intentionally placing yourself in challenging situations that you would normally avoid. Take cold showers. Fast for 24 hours. Delete social media from your phone for a week. Sleep on the floor occasionally. Train in all weather conditions. Have the difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Start small and gradually increase the intensity. The goal isn't masochism, but inoculation, exposing yourself to controlled doses of discomfort to build resistance to larger challenges. Psychologists call this hormesis, the beneficial effect of exposing yourself to mild stressors. Just as a vaccine works by introducing a manageable version of a pathogen, voluntary discomfort works by training your system to handle stress effectively. Step 2. Cultivate radical honesty. "I'm not upset that you lied to me," Nietzsche once wrote. "I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you." The strongest minds are those that can face reality without flinching, including the reality of their own shortcomings, failures, and shadows. Begin by eliminating the small lies you tell yourself daily, that you're fine when you're struggling, that you'll start tomorrow when you've been saying that for years, that your relationship is going through a phase when it's fundamentally broken. Then extend this honesty outward, not as cruelty. Nietzsche wasn't advocating for tactlessness, but as a commitment to living in truth. When you stop concealing who you are, you reclaim enormous amounts of psychological energy previously spent on maintaining facades. This radical honesty terrifies people because most social interaction is built on polite fictions. When you refuse to participate in these games, you become a destabilizing presence, a walking reminder of the gaps between what is said.
Step 3. Embrace philosophical solitude. A thinker sees his own actions as experiments and questions, as attempts to find out something, wrote Nietzsche. Success and failure are for him answers above all. Set aside time regularly, daily if possible, for genuine solitude. Not just physical isolation, but mental solitude, a state where you're not consuming content, not distracted by technology, not in conversation with others, but genuinely alone with your thoughts. Use this time to question everything you've accepted uncritically, your political views, your religious beliefs, your career path, your relationships, your habits. Ask yourself, is this truly mine, or have I inherited it? Does this serve my growth, or is it limiting me? Most people are deeply uncomfortable with this level of self-examination. They distract themselves with noise and activity precisely to avoid confronting such questions. Your willingness to face them develops both intellectual independence and emotional resilience. Step 4. Transmute negative emotions. The most spiritual human beings, assuming they are the most courageous, also experience by far the most painful tragedies. But it is precisely for this reason that they honor life, because it brings against them its most formidable weapons. Rather than suppressing or indulging negative emotions, learn to transmute them, to convert their energy into productive force. When you feel anger, use its intensity to break through creative blocks or power through difficult tasks. When you feel anxiety, recognize it as heightened awareness and channel it into thorough preparation. When you feel grief, allow it to deepen your capacity for connection and appreciation. This alchemical approach to emotion, extracting value even from the most painful feelings, builds a psychological flexibility that others find both impressive and disconcerting. You're no longer at the mercy of emotional weather, but have learned to harness every atmospheric condition. Step 5. Create a personal value system. He who would learn to fly one day must first learn to stand and walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch centers on the creation of new values in the absence of external moral authorities. While this sounds abstract, it's intensely practical. Begin by identifying what you truly value, independent of social conditioning. What activities make you lose track of time? What injustices genuinely outrage you? What beauty moves you to tears? These are clues to your authentic values.
Then, codify these values into principles that guide your decisions. Create your own commandments, define your non-negotiables, establish your own metrics for success that may have nothing to do with conventional achievements. This personal value system becomes your North Star when navigating difficult choices. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of seeking external validation and protects you from manipulation. People with strong personal value systems unsettle others because they can't be easily influenced by social pressure, guilt, or flattery. Their internal compass remains steady, regardless of external storms. When integrated, these 5 practices, voluntary discomfort, radical honesty, philosophical solitude, emotional transmutation, and personal value creation, form the foundation of extraordinary mental strength. Not the fragile strength that comes from avoiding challenge, but the profound resilience that emerges from embracing it. As Nietzsche wrote, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well, the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind." This framework demands constant growth, constant shedding of old skins, but the reward is a mind that no longer fears what others fear, that stands firm when others crumble, that creates meaning even in the darkest circumstances. This is the mind that both attracts and terrifies, because it reminds others of what they could become if they too had the courage to embrace life's struggles rather than avoid them. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. With these words, Nietzsche identified why truly strong minds are often feared. They stand apart from collective madness. Let's explore why the psychological strength we've been discussing unsettles people so deeply. Understanding this dynamic will help you navigate the social consequences of becoming mentally stronger. First, the person who has built an unassailable mind threatens others' self-deception. Most people maintain elaborate networks of comforting lies, that their limitations are external rather than internal, that their failures are due to bad luck rather than poor choices, that their conformity is wisdom rather than fear. When they encounter someone who has embraced responsibility for their own life, who has stopped blaming circumstances for their condition, it creates cognitive dissonance. Their excuses suddenly appear as exactly that. Excuses. As social psychologists have demonstrated through research on downward social comparison, people often prefer to surround themselves with others who share their limitations. It validates their own choices and protects their self-image. The person of extraordinary mental strength, who has voluntarily faced what others avoid, who has built meaning from suffering rather than being destroyed by it, disrupts this comfortable arrangement. Their very existence suggests an alternative path that others could have taken, but didn't have the courage to pursue. Second, the independent thinker threatens social cohesion. Human groups maintain stability through shared beliefs and taboos, things that must be thought and things that must not be thought. The person who thinks freely, who questions these boundaries, who speaks forbidden thoughts, becomes a destabilizing force. Nietzsche understood this when he wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." This explains why authentic mental strength often leads to periods of isolation. By refusing to participate in collective self-deception, you may find yourself temporarily excluded from certain social circles. This is the price of psychological sovereignty. Third, the person who doesn't break when they're supposed to break disrupts power dynamics. Systems of control, whether in families, workplaces, relationships, or societies, depend on predictable responses to pressure. When you manipulate someone successfully, they react in the way you intend. When you apply pressure and they don't bend, when you threaten and they don't fear, when you reject and they don't seek approval, your power over them evaporates. This is what makes mentally strong people seem dangerous to those accustomed to controlling others. They are, in a very real sense, ungovernable, not in the chaotic way, but in the sense that their center of gravity is internal rather than external. Fourth, the person who walks alone reminds others of the path not taken. Most people make significant compromises in their lives, accepting the safe job rather than pursuing their passion, staying in the comfortable but unfulfilling relationship, abandoning their deepest values for social acceptance. These compromises are bearable as long as they're seen as necessary, as what any reasonable person would do. But the individual who refuses to compromise, who accepts the consequences of authentic living, implicitly challenges this narrative. Their courage highlights others' capitulation. As Nietzsche put it, the secret for harvesting from existence the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously. Build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius. Most people don't want to be reminded that they could be living more courageously. The mentally strong person is a walking reminder. Finally, and perhaps most profoundly, the person of extraordinary psychological strength has made peace with their own mortality. They have faced the most terrifying truth of human existence, that we die, that everything we build will one day crumble, that we are infinitesimally small in the scope of cosmic time, and have nevertheless affirmed life. This stance toward existence, what Nietzsche called the eternal recurrence, the hypothetical ability to affirm living the same life over and over for eternity, creates a kind of psychological invincibility. When you have already accepted the worst that can happen, when you have looked into the abyss and not turned away, what is left to fear? This fearlessness is deeply unsettling to those still running from their own mortality, still hoping that the right accomplishments or possessions or relationships will somehow save them from their finite nature. Here's the brutal truth that no self-help guru will tell you. When you truly begin to develop extraordinary psychological strength, people won't just admire you. Many will actively avoid you. Your mental power will make them profoundly uncomfortable. This isn't speculation. It's the inevitable consequence of your transformation. The average person lives in a prison of excuses. I would pursue my dreams, but the economy. I would speak my truth, but what would people think? I would face my fears, but I'm not ready yet. These narratives provide comfort. They protect the ego while justifying mediocrity. Then you enter the room, someone who has stopped blaming circumstances, who has embraced suffering as fuel, who stands firmly in their own truth, regardless of social consequences. Your very existence becomes an indictment of their excuses. As Nietzsche wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." This explains why truly independent minds are often isolated, not because they lack social skills, but because they've outgrown the need for constant validation that keeps most social relationships intact. Here's your warning. When you apply the framework I've shared today, prepare for 3 inevitable responses. First, confusion. People won't understand why you voluntarily embrace discomfort, why you speak truths others avoid, why you stand apart from the crowd. Second, resentment. Your strength will trigger others' insecurity. They'll label you as arrogant, extreme, or unstable, anything to avoid confronting what your existence reveals about their choices. Third, attraction. A small minority, those already on the path to their own psychological liberation, will be magnetically drawn to your authenticity. These connections, though rare, will contain more substance than 1,000 shallow relationships. This is the paradox of Nietzschean strength. The same qualities that isolate you from the many will connect you deeply with the vital few. Look around you. What do you see? A world of sleepwalkers, people numbed by comfort, distracted by trivialities, running from the one thing that could actually save them, the transformative power of voluntary suffering. They avoid pain at all costs, not realizing that pain properly harnessed is the only path to genuine strength. They seek safety in the crowd, not understanding that true security comes only from standing alone. They build elaborate defenses against reality, not recognizing that facing the world as it actually is, not as they wish it to be, is the foundation of unshakable power. And what is the cost of this avoidance? Lives of quiet desperation, potential left unrealized, existence without meaning. Nietzsche saw this tragedy unfolding over a century ago. "Man is a rope," he wrote, "tied between beast and Übermensch, a rope over an abyss." Most people spend their entire lives crawling on this rope, paralyzed by the fear of falling, never daring to stand and walk toward their higher self. But you, watching this right now, you feel the pull towards something greater. There's a hunger in you that comfort cannot satisfy, a question that easy answers cannot address, a power that conventional thinking cannot access. This hunger is your salvation. Today, make this decision. Stop crawling. Stand up on the rope. Yes, it will sway beneath you. Yes, the abyss will seem to widen. Yes, every instinct will scream for you to return to safety. Ignore these voices. Take the first step. Choose one discomfort to embrace today. Have one honest conversation you've been avoiding. Spend 1 hour in genuine solitude with your thoughts. Question one belief you've accepted without examination. Create one value that is truly your own. With each step, the rope beneath you transforms from a thin thread into a bridge, from a source of terror into a path to exhilaration. Become who you are. Nietzsche challenged, not the person your parents expected, not the image your culture demands, not the version your fears will allow, but the individual who exists beneath all these masks, your authentic, powerful self. This is what it means to build a mind so strong it terrifies people, to face the darkest truth of existence, that life is suffering, that we die, that meaning isn't given but created, and respond not with despair, but with defiant creation. The strength we've explored isn't about becoming cold or cruel or dominating others. It's about becoming so alive, so engaged with reality, so present to both pain and joy, that nothing, not criticism, not rejection, not failure, not even death itself, can shake your fundamental yes to life. Remember, those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. Dance anyway. The music is playing. Can you hear it? Until next time, embrace the struggle.